Okay, so how many times have you seen like a big medical headline that says, breakthrough, new cure for insert scary disease here,
Oh, yeah.
only to feel kind of let down when it doesn't really do what it says it does?
Yeah.
It's like we're drowning in all this medical news, but
Right.
how much of it actually matters?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about today in
Exactly.
our deep dive.
Yeah, so today we're going to be diving into a paper by John Ioannidis
Oh, yeah, he's great.
from Stanford,
Mm-hmm.
and the paper is called Why Most Clinical Research is Not Useful.
It's a good one.
And let me tell you, he does not pull any punches in this.
He really doesn't. And you would think that
Yeah.
a paper with a title like that would be super controversial.
Right.
But his work is actually really well respected in the medical community.
Totally.
He makes a really strong case for why so much research, even if the findings are technically accurate,
Right.
might not actually be all that useful.
Yeah, so we're going to unpack this.
Okay.
Pretty shocking paper, honestly, and by the end you'll be able to...
Hopefully spot the truly valuable research from the fluff.
Exactly.
So first off, Ioannidis drops the statistic that's kind of mind-blowing.
Okay.
He estimates that 85% of medical research is wasted.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's billions of dollars and countless hours down the drain.
How is that even possible?
Yeah, how is that even possible?
Well, it's really important to remember that researchers aren't like setting out to waste all this time and money.
Right.
The problem, as Ioannidis sees it, isn't with the science itself. It's more that the system is set up to incentivize certain types of research that aren't always the most beneficial for patients.
Interesting. So what's the solution to this?
Well, Ioannidis actually gives us a framework of 8 key features that characterize what he believes is truly useful clinical research.
Okay. I like a good framework.
Yeah.
Like a checklist.
Yeah, we love a checklist.
Yeah.
So he uses this framework to kind of hold a magnifying glass up to the whole research landscape. And
the results aren't pretty.
Okay, so let's go through this checklist then.
Okay.
What's the first must-have feature of useful research?
So the first one is problem base.
Problem base.
Which seems pretty fundamental.
Yeah.
Research should be tackling problems that are actually important, right? Like, obviously.
But Ioannidis says that a surprising amount of research actually focuses on issues that either aren't that widespread or they get blown out of proportion.
You mean like those conditions that suddenly seem to be everywhere once there's a new drug to treat it?
Exactly.
Like all of a sudden everyone has that.
Yeah, he calls this disease mongering.
Disease mongering.
It's when research hypes up these minor issues to create a market for new treatments.
Oh, so it's like everyone's worried about restless leg syndrome all of a sudden, even if it's not actually causing problems.
Yeah, or low T.
Right. Low T.
Like all these things that you're like, do I have that? Maybe I need to get checked for that now.
Right, and it's not to say that these conditions don't exist.
Sure.
But research is sometimes focusing on them in a way that benefits maybe drug companies more than the patients.
Right, okay, so problem base. Check that box carefully.
Yes, very carefully.
Make sure it's a real problem.
Yes.
What's next?
Next is context placement.
Context placement.
So this means that good research needs to build on what we already know.
Right.
It can't exist in a vacuum.
Right. We don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. But unfortunately, Ioannidis says that a lot of studies skip this step.
Oh.
They don't bother to do like a comprehensive review of the existing evidence.
It's not good.
Before they even start.
Yeah.
So this can lead to like redundant studies that don't actually add anything new to our understanding.
Got it.
It's like trying to build a house without even checking to see if the foundation is solid.
Ooh, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, so it's not only a waste of resources, but it also slows down scientific progress.
Right, because we're doing the same thing over and over again.
Exactly.
Ugh. Okay, so context placement, make sure the research is building on what we already know.
Yes.
What's the third must-have on our list?
The third one is information gain.
Information gain.
And this is about whether the study is actually designed to give us reliable, meaningful answers.
Right.
And that comes down to things like study design and statistical power.
You're going to have to break that down for me a little bit.
Sure.
What makes a study statistically powerful?
So it's basically about having enough participants in a study and following them for a long enough time so that you can be confident in the results.
Okay.
Too many studies are what we call underpowered.
Underpowered.
Meaning they're too small or too short to really give us clear answers.
So it's like trying to judge a recipe based on one bite.
Yes. Exactly.
Like you're not getting the full picture?
You need more data.
You need the whole recipe.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And then there's also the issue of surrogate outcomes.
Surrogate outcomes? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
I know, right?
What is that?
So imagine a study is trying to prove that a new drug prevents heart attacks.
Oh.
But heart attacks, thankfully, aren't that common. And it can take years to actually see a difference in the number of people who have them.
Right.
So instead of waiting that long, researchers might measure something else, like cholesterol levels.
Okay.
Assuming that lower cholesterol means fewer heart attacks down the road.
So it's like a shortcut?
Kind of.
But does it always work?
Well, that's the tricky part.
Oh.
Surrogate outcomes can be useful.
Okay.
But they have to be chosen and validated very carefully.
Got it.
Otherwise, you might be celebrating a successful study based on a result that doesn't actually translate into a real benefit for patients.
So you don't want to get false hope.
Right.
From a study that looks promising, but isn't actually measuring what matters.
Right.
Right. Okay, I see that.
Yeah.
So information gain, it's about having enough data and making sure we're measuring the right things.
Yes.
What's next on our list of useful research must-haves?
Number 4 is pragmatism.
Pragmatism, okay.
And this one is especially important for understanding how research applies to your life.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So think about it. A lot of clinical research happens in like highly controlled environments like labs or hospitals.
Sure.
Everyone is following a strict protocol.
Right.
They're taking their medications perfectly.
Yeah.
Showing up for all their appointments.
Right. On schedule.
But real life is messy.
Oh, absolutely. I can barely remember to take my vitamins, let alone follow some complicated treatment plan perfectly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So a drug that shows like incredible results in a clinical trial might not work as well. The real work, where people have busy lives, forget to take their pills, and, maybe eat a donut or two.
Right, and don't exercise as much as they should.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we need is research that reflects the reality of being human.
The reality of being human.
Yes.
Okay.
I like that.
So that means not just studying treatments in a perfectly controlled bubble.
Right.
But also making sure that the people in those studies are actually representative of the patients who are going to be using the treatments.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so pragmatism research that reflects real life. What's number 5 on our checklist?
All right. Number 5 is patient-centeredness.
Patient-centeredness.
You'd think this would be like a given.
Yeah.
But Ioannidis points out that there can be a huge disconnect between what researchers are focused on and what patients actually care about.
Wait, really? Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say there's a study that's focused on a new cancer treatment.
Okay.
Researchers might be thrilled.
If the treatment shrinks the tumor by a certain percentage, but for the patient, shrinking the tumor might not be their biggest concern. They might be more worried about side effects, quality of life during the treatment, or whether they'll be able to continue working or caring for their family.
So a study could be a success for the researchers, but not really address the things that matter most to the people who are living with the disease.
Unfortunately, that happens more often than you think.
Wow.
Yeah. So truly useful research needs to be designed with the patient's perspective in mind, measuring outcomes that matter to them, not just to researchers or drug companies.
It's a really powerful point. It's a good reminder that research shouldn't just be about data points.
Yeah.
It should be about improving people's lives.
Exactly.
All right, so patient-centeredness, check. What's next on Ioannidis' list?
Okay, next up is value for money.
Value for money.
And this one's really crucial when we're talking about healthcare resources, which are, always limited.
Yes, sadly.
So it's not just about whether the research is interesting.
Right.
It's about whether it's worth the investment.
Right. We want to make sure we're getting good return on that investment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Different studies require different levels of funding.
Sure.
And we need to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck.
Absolutely.
Ioannidis argues that a lot of money is actually wasted on research that's poorly designed or redundant or just unlikely to produce any meaningful results.
Right. So it's like investing in a stock that's probably not going to go up.
Exactly.
You're better off putting your money somewhere else.
You got to diversify your portfolio.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this also ties into his point that streamlining research and reducing unnecessary costs could actually free up resources to do better research.
So it's about working smarter, not just harder.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, so value for money. Check. On to number 7 on our list. What is it?
This one might seem obvious, but it's often overlooked. It's feasibility.
Feasibility, okay.
Basically, can the research actually be done?
Right.
Ioannidis points out that a lot of studies get started with really ambitious goals, but then they fall apart because they weren't really realistic to begin with.
Like they require recruiting thousands of participants with a super specific condition, but there just aren't that many people who fit the criteria.
That's one example, yeah.
Right.
Or a study that involves a treatment that's too complex or expensive to actually implement in the real world.
Got it.
So it's important to think through the logistics and the potential challenges before you launch a study.
Right. Don't just get carried away by a cool idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's better to plan carefully and set realistic expectations than to waste time and money on a study that was doomed from the start.
Right. Okay, so feasibility. Can we actually do this research check?
We're down to our last feature on the checklist. Drum roll, please.
Okay, last but not least is transparency.
Transparency.
And this is all about making sure that the research is trustworthy.
Okay, so this is about more than just the results. It's also about how the research was done.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Transparency means that researchers are open about their methods, their data, and how they analyze the results.
Yeah.
This allows other scientists to scrutinize the work, replicate the findings, and build upon the research.
So this is how science self-corrects and advances.
Exactly. It's really important.
Okay.
And I'm guessing this is also about avoiding bias.
Yeah.
Right? Making sure that the researcher's own beliefs or interests don't skew the results.
Totally. So transparency is essential for minimizing bias.
Yes.
And ensuring that the research is as objective as possible.
Yeah. And without transparency, it's impossible to truly trust the findings. Right. No matter how exciting they might seem.
No matter how much you want to believe them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've got our checklist of 8 features for useful research. Problem base.
Right.
Context placement, information gain, pragmatism, patient-centeredness, value for money, feasibility, and transparency.
It's a good list.
It's a pretty comprehensive list.
It is.
But now the big question is how much clinical research actually measures up to these standards.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's where things get a little discouraging.
No.
In his paper, Ioannidis analyzes a large sample of published studies.
Okay.
And he finds that most of them actually fall short on multiple of these features.
Wow.
Even research that's published in, like, prestigious medical journals.
Oh, wow. So you'd think that the top journals would be publishing the most rigorous research.
You would think that, right. But the reality is that the current system incentivizes researchers to publish as much as possible, often at the expense of quality and relevance.
So we're left with this situation where there's a lot of research being published.
Yeah.
But a lot of it isn't actually moving the needle in terms of improving healthcare.
Yeah, it's not really helping.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the bad news.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping there's some good news too, right?
Don't worry. There is hope.
Okay.
Ioannidis doesn't just point out the problems.
Okay.
He also offers some potential solutions.
Oh, good.
And that's what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive.
Can't wait.
So stay tuned.
All right. See you next time. Okay, so we established that a lot of medical research doesn't quite hit the mark when it comes to usefulness.
Right.
But let's not despair just yet.
Yeah, there's still hope.
In part 1, you mentioned that Ioannidis offers some potential solutions to this problem.
He does.
I'm eager to hear what he suggests.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin to fix a system this big?
Well, his solutions involve a pretty radical shift in how we think about and fund clinical research. He argues that we need to move away from this publish or perish mentality that prioritizes quantity over quality.
So it's not just about doing more research, it's about doing better research.
Exactly.
Okay.
One of his most interesting ideas is to shift funding priorities away from preclinical research and more towards clinical trials.
Wait, so instead of pouring money into lab studies, we should be focusing on research that involves actual patients.
That's the idea.
Okay.
Think about it. A lot of preclinical research focuses on developing new drug targets or treatments.
Okay.
But many of these never actually make it to human trials.
Really?
Yeah, either because they don't work as expected or because there's no commercial incentive to develop them.
So we're basically throwing money at research that might never benefit patients.
That's a risk, And Ioannidis says we could get a much bigger return on investment by redirecting those funds towards well-designed, patient-centered clinical trials. It's about investing in research that has a higher probability of actually making a difference in people's lives.
Okay, so it's not just about where the money goes.
Right.
It's also about who's doing the research and how they're trained.
Exactly. Okay. Ioannidis points out that the clinical research workforce is vast.
Okay.
But it often lacks proper training and support.
So we need to invest in developing a skilled and committed research community.
Yes.
That prioritizes rigorous methods, ethical conduct, and of course, patient-centeredness.
Absolutely.
So instead of churning out papers just to pad their resumes, researchers should be focused on doing high-quality, impactful work.
Exactly.
Love that.
And that includes training physicians to be savvy consumers of research.
Yeah, they need to know how to read these studies.
Yeah, they need to be able to critically evaluate studies, understand their limitations, and apply those findings to their practice in a way that actually benefits their patients.
That's a great point. It's not just about researchers doing better research.
Yeah.
It's about everyone in the healthcare system understanding how to make sense of the evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the role of journals.
Oh, yeah. Journals?
They have a huge influence on what kind of research gets published and seen by the medical community.
So how can journals contribute to this shift towards more useful research? Should they be rejecting more studies that don't meet those 8 criteria we talked about?
That's one approach.
Okay.
But Ioannidis suggests a more nuanced solution.
Okay.
He proposes something called a journal clinical usefulness factor.
Interesting.
Which would essentially rate published research based on those 8 key features we discussed earlier.
So it's like a scorecard for how useful a study is.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see how that would incentivize researchers to focus on those elements.
Exactly. It would create transparency and accountability, pushing the research community towards more impactful work.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about researchers, funders, journals.
Yeah.
But what about patients?
Oh, yeah.
They're the ones who ultimately stand to benefit or suffer from this research.
Right.
They shouldn't be passive bystanders in this process.
Absolutely not. They need to be much more involved in setting research priorities.
So they need a seat at the table.
Yes, they need to be at the table.
Making sure the research is addressing the questions that matter most to them.
Exactly.
So it's about empowering patients to demand research that's relevant to their lives.
Yes.
Not just interesting to scientists.
That's right.
Okay.
Patients should have a voice in shaping the research agenda,
Yeah.
advocating for studies that address their needs and priorities.
Like pushing for more pragmatic trials that reflect real-world conditions and patient preferences.
Yes.
This all sounds great in theory, but I can't help but wonder how realistic these changes are.
Yeah, it's a big system.
The research system is huge and complex.
It is.
There's so many stakeholders involved.
There are a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
But Ioannidis is optimistic.
Okay, good.
He believes that even small changes can have a ripple effect.
I like that.
By working together, researchers, funders, journals, and patients can push for a more meaningful and impactful research agenda.
It's about creating a system that rewards and prioritizes research that truly makes a difference.
Exactly.
And this is where we start to see a glimmer of hope amidst all the doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Imagine if even a fraction of that wasted research funding could be redirected towards solving the most pressing health challenges.
Oh, the possibilities are endless.
The possibilities are mind-boggling.
Yeah.
We could make incredible progress in areas like cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease.
Absolutely.
The list goes on.
Yeah, and it's not just about finding cures, though. It's about improving the quality of life for patients, developing better preventative strategies, and just making sure that healthcare decisions are based on the best available evidence.
So much good could be done.
So much good.
Okay, so we've covered the problem, the criteria for useful research, and some potential solutions.
Some ways to move forward.
But what does this all mean for our listeners?
Right, good question.
What can you do to be a more savvy consumer of medical information?
Yeah, how can you make sure you're not getting swept away by hype or misleading studies? That's a great question. It is a great question.
So how can people listening make sure they're not getting swept away by hype or misleading studies?
Well, the most important thing to remember is that you are not powerless.
Right.
You can be an informed and empowered consumer of medical information.
Yes.
It starts with recognizing that not all research is created equal.
So don't just blindly accept those flashy headlines or the miracle cure claims you see online.
Exactly.
We got to dig a little deeper.
We got to dig deeper. And that's where those 8 key features of useful research we discussed can really be your guideposts.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, think of them as your personal BS detector.
Okay, a BS detector for health information.
Yes.
I love it.
Everyone needs one of those.
Everyone needs one.
Yeah.
So how can we actually use these features in everyday life?
Well, it's all about asking the right questions.
Okay.
When you come across a new study or a medical claim, ask yourself, is this addressing a problem that's actually relevant to me?
Okay.
Is it building on existing evidence?
Right.
Or is it just like one isolated study?
Yeah.
Does it provide clear and meaningful information?
Right.
Or is it full of jargon and vague conclusions?
Good point. And don't forget about pragmatism.
Yes, pragmatism.
Does this research reflect real-life conditions and patient priorities, or was it done in some super-controlled lab setting?
Right.
That doesn't even resemble the real world.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, those are really good questions to keep in mind.
And while you're doing all this sleuthing,
Yeah.
don't forget to consider the source of the information.
Right, like where is this coming from?
Yeah. Who funded the research? Are there any potential conflicts of interest?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's like checking the author bio on Wikipedia.
Yes, exactly.
To see if they have a hidden agenda.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and transparency is key.
Transparency is key.
Can you actually access the full study methods and data?
Yeah.
Or is it all hidden behind a paywall?
Right, or shrouded in secrecy.
Yeah, okay, so if the answer to any of these questions is no, or I'm not sure, that's a red flag.
Yeah, that's a big red flag.
All right, gotta watch out for those.
Be a little skeptical.
Be skeptical.
Yeah, it's like being a detective. You've got to gather the evidence.
Yeah.
And examine it carefully.
Don't jump to conclusions.
Not drawing any conclusions, exactly.
And if you're still feeling unsure, don't be afraid to ask your doctor or another healthcare provider.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
About the research.
Talk to your doctor.
Yeah.
They should be happy to discuss the evidence with you and help you make sense of it.
Yeah, it's all about having that open and honest dialogue with your care team. Making sure that decisions are based on the most relevant and reliable information.
That's what it's all about.
Okay, now I know a lot of people get their medical information from the news and social media.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Any tips for navigating that landscape?
So be mindful of how the medias are reporting on a study.
Okay.
Sometimes headlines can be very misleading.
Right.
Or sensationalized to grab your attention.
It's all about the clicks.
Yeah, exactly. So it's crucial to read beyond the headlines and look for balanced reporting.
Don't just skim the clickbait.
Yeah. Look for news sources that cite the original research studies and provide some context for the findings.
Be wary of those stories that make sweeping generalizations or promise miracle cures.
Yes. Always be wary of those.
Because remember, medical research is complex and nuanced.
It is.
It's rare to find one single study that gives us all the answers.
Right.
So basically, be skeptical of those quick fixes.
Yes.
And easy solutions.
Exactly. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey.
You're not alone.
There are resources out there to help you make sense of all this medical research.
Absolutely. Websites like PubMed.
Oh, yeah, PubMed.
And the Cochrane Library offer access to tons of reliable information.
So much good information out there.
And there are organizations like the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, or PCRI.
Okay, PCRI.
That are dedicated to funding and promoting research that's actually relevant to patients.
So arm yourself with knowledge, ask questions, and be a critical thinker.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
It's your health.
Right.
And you deserve to have the best possible information.
Yes, you do.
To make those informed decisions.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that brings us to our final thought for this deep dive. We've talked a lot about the problems with wasted research funding.
We have.
But imagine if we could redirect even a fraction of those resources towards research that truly matters.
Think of the breakthroughs we could achieve.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have a stake in improving the quality and relevance of clinical research.
We do.
By being informed and engaged consumers, we can push for a future where research truly makes a difference in people's lives.
Well said.
That's it for our deep dive today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay well.